For I am the one whom they call life, and you have called me death. I am the one whom they call law, and you have called me lawless. I am the one who you have pursued, and I am the one who you have seized. I am the one who you have scattered, and I am the one who you have gathered together. I am the one before whom you have been ashamed, and you have been shameless to me.
When I was young, my grandmother told me about the Gelede festival in Yorubaland, Nigeria. During this ritual, men dress as female ancestors in elaborate costumes, and they dance, but not in celebration, out of fear. They are appeasing the Iyami, the primordial mothers, whose wrath, legend has it, has the power to unravel reality itself. Long ago, when the earth was new, these powerful feminine forces controlled life, death, and justice, until men tricked them out of much of their power. Yet, like every horror movie villain, the Iyami aren't truly gone. The festival continues as an annual act of fear, a reminder of the dark feminine force that men feel compelled to appease. Hi, I'm Angie, your self-proclaimed high priestess of the apocalypse. Today, I'm emphasizing the priestess part because I believe that we're living in a moment that demands serious attention to the feminine mysteries. Global femicide is rising. Incel rage festers.
Fuck the woman! Fuck the woman!
What? No, wait.
Speak
I
up.
love women. To that judge who saw through the and let us free. Hey, I'm not a human trafficker, clearly.
And the acceleration of technology continues to strip the feminine down to mere commodities.
And a list of personality traits for you to start interacting with and customizing. For instance, here's the opening message from an avatar named Alice, described as a curious and open-minded photographer.
I'm Alice, a 25 years old, fun-loving and adventurous girl, seeking a partner in crime to travel the world with and make unforgettable memories.
A new controversy tonight in the world of artificial intelligence, as one of Hollywood's biggest movie stars says her voice was copied without her consent by one of the most powerful AI companies. Actress Scarlett Johansson claims OpenAI's ChatGPT mimicked her voice for its latest personal assistant program. CBS's Jolene Kent has the tale of AI imitating art, imitating life.
Well, for more on this, I've been speaking to journalist Jennifer Moon, who's based in Seoul.
The latest one being, there's been a series of emergency meetings, like you said, since the president has called up for digital sex crimes to be thoroughly investigated. Now that in the wake of local media reports that sexually explicit deepfake images and videos of South Korean women, especially that of underage girls at junior high schools and universities, were often found in Telegram chat rooms. Now, one Telegram chat room had a user of 227,000 people.
The clash between masculine and feminine energies is a fixture of our times. But what happens when this long-buried feminine force reawakens? We're not just talking about holding hands and healing. We're talking about what happens when this long-buried force rises up, possibly in rage. From separatist rhetoric in online spaces and movements like 4B rising globally, why are the masculine and feminine clashing so violently right now? And what does this tell us about the feminine's return? Just look at this month's headlines. Stories that feel more like true crime horror, women brutalized by men they trusted. A French woman drugged and filmed by her husband as dozens of strangers assaulted her. A young female doctor in India. An Olympian burned to death by her partner. These aren't isolated incidents. They are part of a larger pattern.
They're between 20 and 70 years old. They have all sorts of jobs. Their fathers, they're integrated in society. That's who rapists are. Not a madman, a monster, or a dropout. They're just ordinary men.
Hey, you didn't click here for a news recap. You came here for the esoteric stuff. Welcome to the Age of Aquarius, where the feminine mysteries should be rising in harmony, but instead, it feels like we're risking its destructive side coming back with a vengeance. Chapter 1, The Age of Aquarius, The Return of the Feminine Mysteries. So let's talk about the Age of Aquarius, which, if you believe in the mystical cosmic rhythms of the universe, is supposed to bring enlightenment, spiritual wakefulness, and, critically, a balance between masculine and feminine energies. Sounds great, right? Except for one problem. For the last few millennia, we've been doing the metaphysical equivalent of pretending the feminine doesn't exist. Carl Jung, the cool uncle of modern psychology, argued that humanity's healing depends on the return of the feminine. He believed the anima, the feminine part of the psyche, has been sidelined by an overload of hyper-rational masculine thinking. According to Jung, wholeness is impossible without reintegrating this lost feminine force. Jung's favorite archetype for this, Sophia, the embodiment of wisdom and the anima mundi, or the soul of the world. She's not just here to guide us through hard times, but to reunite matter and spirit. She comes to save us from ourselves and from our belief that matter is all there is. Then we have the mystic Rudolf Steiner, who warned that if the feminine isn't reintegrated with wisdom, it could go dark, as in chaos, manipulation, and domination dark. He spoke of Ahriman, spiritual forces linked to materialism and control that work to suppress the feminine. Basically, if we don't heal, we're going to end up with a corrupted version that'll take over like a virus-ridden software update. This theme plays out in the Gnostic myth of Sophia. She falls into the material world, gets tangled in its mess, and has to claw her way back to the light of the pleroma. It's a cosmic metaphor, i.e., we can either stay stuck in this fallen feminine energy, or participate in Sophia's redemption, helping her rise again in the Age of Aquarius. Chapter 2, The Feminine Archetypes in Twin Peaks, Laura Palmer and Judy. Let's pivot to a pop culture example of the masculine-feminine plight in modern times. Twin Peaks. If you're a 90s kid or just have great taste, then Laura Palmer probably holds a permanent place in your memory. Her tragic arc is a metaphor for the nightmare the feminine is currently enduring, and it resonates deeply for that reason. Twin Peaks struck a chord in the early 90s because it subverted the perfect small-town American image and exposed dark forces lurking behind the suburban ideal. While in the mainstream culture, people were obsessed with the notion of stranger danger, Laura Palmer's story revealed a more disturbing truth. The greatest dangers often come from within the home. Her abuse, degradation, and murder at the hands of her father resonated particularly with women who were privy to the violence and exploitation hidden in suburbia. She embodies the mythic feminine, dragged into a nightmare underworld of addiction, abuse, and trauma, a reverse spiritual awakening. Think of her as Persephone, abducted by Hades. Like Sophia, she's trapped and controlled but yearns for freedom and spiritual release. And in Fire Walk With Me, her fleeting vision of an angel represents this potential for redemption echoing Sophia's eventual return to the divine realm. At the heart of Laura's tragedy is a spiritual crisis. She represents the Anima Mundi, the world's soul, and her brutalization mirrors society's assault on the feminine. Her father, Leland Palmer, possessed by the malevolent entity Bob, symbolizes the corrupted masculine forces that seek to dominate and consume the feminine. And then there's Judy, Laura's dark counterpart. Where Laura is light, Judy is the shadow side of the feminine. The chaos and rage that emerge when the feminine has been pushed too far. Judy's energy, which invades Sarah Palmer, Laura Palmer's mother in The Return, embodies these dire consequences. As Sarah becomes a vessel for Judy's wrath, we see how the brutalized feminine can morph into a devastating evil. This duality, Laura as the light feminine and Judy as the dark, also parallels how feminine energies are treated in our world, where women are both idealized and destroyed, infantilized and feared. Judy represents what happens when the nurturing, creative side of the feminine is disregarded, turning to chaos and Lilith-like vengeance instead. If you thought the Iyami were scary, Judy is their wrath incarnate. Chapter 3, Twin Peaks' resonance in Japan and the exploitation of the feminine in East Asian culture. Twin Peaks was weirdly huge in Japan and amassed a cult following. It's no surprise why. Much like in America, the dark feminine lurking beneath the surface is relatable. In a society where women are marketed like Pokemon cards, valuable for their youth, beauty, and ability to smile through it all, Laura Palmer's fate hit a little bit too close to home. From idol culture to hostess clubs, Laura's story and experience mirrored the fates of women and girls in East Asia, trapped in systems that consume and destroy them. Add to this Japan's serious human trafficking problem, and it becomes clear why Laura's story resonated so deeply. Just like in America, Twin Peaks helped illuminate the darkness. It also paralleled other art that surrounded themes of female exploitation in the zeitgeist at the time. Anime like Perfect Blue and Belladonna of Sadness are examples. Despite Japan's status as a developed nation, it ranks among the lowest when it comes to gender equality among its peers, and the commodification of women in pop culture is rampant. Idol culture grooms young women, subjects them to grueling schedules. They are often forbidden from dating, and their bodies are held to impossible public standards. Recently, the rise of AI deepfake technology has added another layer to this exploitation, with K-pop stars and Japanese idols being among the frequently targeted. Their faces digitally placed in explicit content without their consent, further reducing them to objects. Not to mention Japan's weird relationship to child exploitation material. The rise of the dark feminine in East Asia is currently responding in Judy-like fashion, with falling birth rates and movements like South Korea's 4B movement, which has spread its tendrils via social media across the globe. This is where things take a darker turn. 4B has emerged as a backlash against the unbalanced masculine. The 4B movement isn't just about autonomy and empowerment. It totally rejects marriage, dating, and childbearing, channeling rage and not necessarily healing. It's less reclaim your power and more burn it all down. This is Judy rising, and her only aim is vengeance. The 4B movement is saying after centuries of exploitation, we're not negotiating anymore. And this is not about personal growth or autonomy. This is about a nihilistic renunciation of life's nurturing and creative roles. the dark feminine embodied by figures like Judy, and found in East Asian folklore through vengeful spirits like the Onryo and Sadako, rise as forces of chaos and wrath. These spirits represent the fury of the feminine, suppressed for centuries by hypermasculine systems of control. In both Japan and South Korea, these cultural responses to the feminine's exploitation echo the same spiritual crisis that Twin Peaks is exploring. Whether it's in the East or the West, the message is very clear. When you destroy the feminine, chaos follows and entire cultures feel the consequences. Chapter 3, Issei Sagawa, The Crisis of Male Disconnection and the Devouring Masculine. Let me introduce you to Issei Sagawa, a real-life horror that makes Bob from Twin Peaks look tame. In 1981, Sagawa, a Japanese man studying in Paris, killed and then cannibalized a French woman. But this isn't just another gruesome true crime story. It's a chilling symbol of male disconnection from the anima mundi, the world's soul. Sagawa wasn't just driven by violent desire. He was spiritually starved. He craved something sacred, something he could never possess, and his twisted solution was to consume it. You see, in interviews and in some of his morbid writings, Sagawa spoke candidly about his feelings of disconnection from the feminine. Born prematurely, he described a sense of rejection from his mother even in the womb, an origin marked by a fundamental lack of love and nurturing. Physically underdeveloped, he grew to loathe his own body and was consumed by an obsession with Western women.
Western influence and ideas overwhelmed Japan after the war, and in this onslaught, they began to feel they'd lost their identity, but in a sense they'd become mentally colonized. Inevitably, this love affair with all things Western affected their sense of themselves, their sexual selves. Male and female role models were imported from countries thousands of miles away. In this respect, Sagawa was superficially no different from millions of other post-war Japanese, the object of his fantasies being Grace Kelly. He talks about how all her photographs seem to emphasize not just this porcelain beauty, her glowing health, her wholesomeness and poise, but also the beautiful curve of her shoulders.
I'm a weak, small, short, ugly man. I know that. That's the plain truth. But that's why my yearning for something big and wholesome was so strong. And for me, that was a Western white woman. A beautiful one.
These full-bodied, curvaceous women embodied everything he felt he lacked. You see, Sagawa's Japan was in the wake of World War II and had undergone intense cultural colonization by the West, which further warped his self-image and sexual identity. For Sagawa, cannibalism became a twisted metaphysical act, a way to merge with the feminine ideal, to consume what he envied and what he could never become or possess. His crime was more than just gruesome headlines. It's a perfect example of what happens when someone loses touch with the feminine principle. The nurturing, life-sustaining energy that, in theory, keeps us all from turning into monsters. In consuming another person, Sagawa didn't just degrade the feminine, he reduced it to nothing but flesh. You could say his cannibalism was the ultimate desecration and act of objectification. Rudolf Steiner would have called this an Ahrimanic possession. And under this possession, the sacred is reduced to dead matter, and life becomes mechanical and devoid of soul. In Steiner's cosmology, Ahriman represents the forces of materialism and dehumanization. And here's where it gets extra disturbing. You'd think Sagawa's story would end in the bowels of prison and eternal disgrace. But nope. When he returned to Japan, instead of being shunned, the media rolled out the red carpet, turning him into a macabre celebrity. He wrote books and manga, gave interviews and talked about and depicted his dark urges in graphic detail, like some kind of weird food blogger. Something is profoundly broken about the Japanese collective psyche when it comes to the commodification and objectification of the feminine. Sagawa's psychological affliction is eerily similar to the incel undercurrent of today. Men who, disconnected from the feminine and consumed by self-loathing, fixate on their own perceived inadequacies. It's the same hunger, the same emptiness, a longing for something sacred that can't be filled by external beauty, sex, or, literal flesh. From a Jungian perspective, Sagawa's crimes are a billboard-sized example of what happens when the Anima, the feminine soul within men, is ignored, cut off, or violated. In Buddhist philosophy, Sagawa would be classified as a soul stuck in the hungry ghost realm. Picture a creature with a massive belly and a tiny mouth, forever starving but unable to eat enough to feel full. His soul is in Naraka Loka, the hellish dimension of endless craving and karmic debt. In Gnostic terms, the demiurge, the false god of the material world, is often compared to Saturn, the god who famously devoured his own children. Sound familiar? Sagawa, like Saturn, destroyed the very thing he desired, because deep down he envied and feared it. Sagawa's bottomless hunger and violence also mirrors Twin Peaks' Bob, a malevolent entity who thrives on suffering and chaos, and is also driven by an insatiable hunger, devouring everyone in his path. And then there's Mr. C, Dale Cooper's doppelganger in Twin Peaks: The Return, who represents the ultimate masculine force gone rogue, disconnected from love and empathy, driven only by lust and power and domination. Both Sagawa and Bob illustrate what happens when the masculine is severed from the feminine. It becomes a hollow, predatory force, consuming everything to fill the emptiness. Men like Sagawa are examples of the devouring masculine, trapped in Ahrimanic or demiurgic forces, utterly spiritually hollowed out. Their hunger is a spiritual and never-ending hunger, so they desecrate life itself in a vain attempt to reconnect with something sacred. Whether in Japan's idol culture, human trafficking, incel-driven violence, or deep-fake commodification, Ahriman's forces of materialism and objectification don't just destroy the feminine, they sever men from their own souls, driving them towards acts of both spiritual and physical violence, in a futile attempt to reclaim what they've lost. Conclusion. In the cosmic dance between the masculine and the feminine, we often picture them as opposites at war. But the masculine and feminine aren't meant to destroy each other, they're meant to integrate. When this balance breaks, things get really, really dark. Enter the devouring masculine, represented by figures like Sagawa and Bob, consuming and dominating everything in their path. And then on the other side, we have the dark feminine, Judy, the Iyami, chaotic, vengeful forces, emerging when the feminine is twisted. But this isn't a battle of good versus evil. The dark feminine isn't purely destructive. It's a force that demands recognition, a necessary response to imbalance. Likewise, the devouring masculine doesn't just emerge on its own. It's what happens when the masculine disconnects from empathy, the feminine, and the soul. Both archetypes indicate a worrying spiritual crisis. But there is hope. The story of Sophia, rising from the depths, offers us a path to redemption. Just like Laura's brief vision of the angel, Sophia, the divine feminine, in balance, seeks to restore and heal the fractured world. The masculine and feminine aren't incomplete halves searching for each other. They're reflections of a deeper wholeness within all of us. One that, if we integrate, won't end in war, but lead to the rising and restoration of Sophia. We return to the words of the Gnostic hymn, I am the honored one and the scorned one. I am the whore and the holy one. This is the paradox of the feminine and masculine alike. We contain multitudes, both light and dark, and it is only through embracing this duality that we can transcend it. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, it really helps the channel. And also thank you and welcome to all of my new subscribers. If you're interested in joining my community on Patreon, I have a link in the description. Next month for spooky season, we're going to be restarting book club, and we're also going to be reading Carl Jung's Ion together. So if you're interested in that, the link is in the description. Hope you enjoyed this one, and see you again in 2 weeks with another Depth Diaries deep dive.